So there are many different Flash game frameworks out there, but one of the simplest and easiest to use is called Flixel. And in this tutorial, or this is actually going to be a series of tutorials, I'm thinking around 3, but it could actually go more than that, of creating a simple game using the Flixel framework. So the first thing you want to do is to come to flixel.org, which is the website, and you want to download the the current most stable version, which as of right now is 2.35. And I've just unzipped that, and inside there's an org folder which contains the source code, and I've just put that into my global ActionScript directory so that I can reference it. So I've already created just a simple project here in Flash Builder. I've called it Invaders, and this is just an ActionScript 3, simple ActionScript 3 project. Now I've created some Swift metadata. 600 by 600 is going to be the size. The background color is going to be black and a frame rate of 30. And here's just my basic, default class that extends sprite. Now inside of the source folder, I have a few different assets here that we're going to be using. And let me actually just show you what those are. So first we have a background image, which is just an image of some stars. And this is going to be kind of a very basic game that we're building, but kind of like a Galaga game. And in fact, we're going to use some of the artwork from that game. So this is just our background image. Then our hero.png, which is our main ship that we're going to use. And you can see it's actually using the ship from Galaga. Then we have an MP3 file that we're going to use. Anytime the ship actually shoots a missile, we're going to play this sound. So again, simple MP3 file that we're going to use. So when we get started with Flixel, the first thing we have to do is our main class, our document class, or the main class of our application, shouldn't extend sprite. It should actually extend the Flixel game class. So it's Flixel game, and then we can just get rid of this import here. So now our main class, Invaders, is extending the Flixel game class. So now the call to the super constructor, we actually pass in some arguments to this. And they are the width and the height of our game, the initial state. In Flixel, everything is based on states. So the first time we come into our movie, we're going to show a menu. So that will be the menu state. Then level 1 of our game will be, our main state. So everything is state based. So this is basically saying which state of the game do we want to load first. Now this zoom property is interesting. So everything in Flixel is actually manually blitted to the screen. So when we see a spaceship and a whole bunch of bullets flying and aliens, those are not individual display objects. They're actually on the display list is just a single bitmap, and the Flixel framework is actually manipulating the pixels in that bitmap. So that technique is called blitting. Now this zoom property will automatically zoom up zoom up all of the pixels in your movie. So if you have really small pixel-based artwork, it can increase the size of that. So the size of our game, we want to fill our Swift, so it's going to be 600 by 600. Now we're going to create a new Flixel state called menu state, and this is going to be the first thing that users see when they come into the game. And then I'm going to set zoom to 1 because I don't want to actually scale up any of my assets. So and that's really all we're going to have in our main file. Now I'm going to go ahead and create that menu state class. So it's going to be called menu state, and this is going to subclass Flixel state. Okay, so now this is the first state that the user is going to be presented with when they launch the game. So what we want to do first is we want to embed that background graphic so we can actually use it. So I'm just going to use regular embed syntax here. The source is back.png, and we're going to create a class for it. And I'm just going to call this back, and it's going to be of type class. So again, common kind of ActionScript or Flex embed code here. Okay, so to the actual constructor, all we're doing is calling the super constructor here. So the way in which we work inside of the state is to override some functions in the Flixel state class. So the first one we're going to override is the create method. So let's override public function create. And this is essentially our initialization function. So as soon as a state is created, it's going to call this function, and this is where we can set everything up. So the first thing we want to do is we want to add the background to our state. So I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it back. Now we don't actually, when we're dealing with Flixel, we don't use the regular sprite class. We use a special class called Flixel sprite, and this contains a whole bunch of other properties and methods that are specific to the Flixel framework. So I'm going to create a new Flixel sprite called back. And to the constructor, there's three things that are expected to be sent in. The first is the X and the Y position of where we want this sprite to be placed, and then which graphics class do we want to use for it. And for that, we're going to use our back class that we created there. So I'm going to pass that in at 0, 0, and then we're going to pass in that back class. So now to actually get this to display in our game, we don't use add child, we actually use the add method. And this is a special class for Flixel that's going to add our sprite into the game. So I'm just going to say add back. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this. And I'm just launching it in the Flash player, but we can see now it's actually immediately gone to our menu state, and it's displaying that background image. Now, a couple of nice things about the Flixel framework is there's some built-in things that you can do. If I hit the plus key, I can actually adjust the volume of the game. If I hit P, I can pause the game, and we can see we have a little menu showing up here. P again to unpause the game. So these are actually built into the Flixel framework. We don't have to do anything to actually get those. So now what I want to do since this is a menu is obviously I want to display some text. So now we could use an actual sprite. We could create a logo in Photoshop, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to create a variable called logo, and this is going to be of type Flixel text is equal to new Flixel text. And there's a few different things we can pass in here. First, we need to pass in the X and the Y of where do we want this positioned in our game. Then the width of the text field. Then the actual text string we want to display. So for the X position, we're going to use a property inside of the Flixel game class, which is just Flixel G. And this class basically contains a lot of functionality that you're going to use as you program your game. So let's go ahead and import that. So we're going to say Flixel G dot width, which is going to get the width of our game. Now we know it's 600 by 600, but again, you want to keep these things dynamic. So we're going to multiply that by 0.5, which is going to get us directly in the middle of our game. Now I'm going to make the actual width of the text field 400 pixels wide, and we're going to center that text. So what I'm going to do is to say minus 200, and that. So again, this is taking into account the width of the text field. Okay, so the next thing is the Y position where we want to put this text, and I'm going to put it at 250. And then the actual width of the text field, again, which I said was 400. Now we're going to pass in what text we want to be in there, and I'm just going to call it invaders because that's the name of our little game. And I can close that. Now we quickly just want to set the formatting on this text. So I'm going to say logo set format. Now we can use other fonts, but there is a nice font that's included with the Flixel game framework. Again, very bitmap, 8-bit game looking font. So I'm just going to pass in null for that. And the next is the size of our text. So I'm going to make it 40. And then the color, I'm going to make it white. And then lastly, we want to center it. So actually in Flixel, we just pass in a string that says center. And now we actually want to add that logo. And again, we just use the add method. So let's see how that looks. We'll launch it up. And there we can see we have our nice bitmap looking text here for the logo of our game. Now I'm going to copy and paste this block because I want to create an additional line underneath that basically the user is going to hit the X key to actually start the game. So I want to put those instructions down here. So I'll call this instruct. And for the width, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be also 400 because we're going to make the text fields the same width. Now for the Y position, we're going to put 280, and again we can test this and fix it however we want. But for the text, I'm going to pass in press X to start. And again, for the formatting, we're actually going to bring that down to 20. We want this to be smaller than the logo. And then I'm actually going to make this red instead. So let's test this. You can see, yeah, it doesn't look perfect because we actually need to bring it down more on the y-axis. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm actually going to put it at 300. Again, we're not going for, perfection here. You can go for perfection, but I'm not going to. So again, invaders, press X to start. Very simple. And I'm actually going to bring that down to 320 just to give it a little more space. Okay, so we have this. Now how do we actually detect for when the X key is pressed? Well, another function you're going to override all the time, very important function, is called update. So this function is essentially called whenever your content in